Chapter 4, American Life in the 17th Century. This chapter compares life in the Chesapeake, Virginia and Maryland, as opposed to life in New England. In the Chesapeake, it was a tobacco-driven economy. People did not live nearly as long as other parts of the colonies. About 50% survived to their 20th birthday. Because so many young women were widows, women had far more property rights than women of the same position and standing in New England. In New England, soil conditions were difficult, so crops weren't nearly as abundant, but the weather was healthier. Families stayed together. They tended to move in families, and women's property rights were not nearly as broad in New England as they were down south. The concept of grandparents came about because people lived long enough to see their children have children. There were some parts of the colonies where the leadership did not understand the concerns of the poor people living in the back country. Classic example is Nathaniel Bacon. He believed that the governor of Virginia, William Berkeley, had been too nice to Indians, that his policies did not protect the poor, people who really didn't own a whole lot of land. So you see the beginning of Bacon's rebellion. It's really not known what would have happened had this rebellion played out because Bacon died at a relatively young age. Chapter 5. Colonial Society on the Eve of Revolution. The English were the largest group of settlers here in the New World. And basically it was their culture and ideas that influenced pretty much everything that went on here in the colonies. However, it cannot be overlooked that Germans and Scot-Irish were also here in smaller percentages, usually under 10%, around 6 or 7. These people did not always have access to great amounts of land or great amounts of power, influence, or money. So sometimes you saw uprisings. One example would be the March of the Paxton Boys in Philadelphia in 1764. They weren't particularly happy with what Quakers were doing at the time, but incidents like this were fairly few and far between. In everyday America, agriculture was, of course, the leading industry. Shipbuilding in the middle colonies, textiles, and, of course, the production and sale of tobacco was also extremely important. Clerics, ministers, were pretty much the most honored profession. Physicians weren't particularly great, and lawyers were very much looked down upon. Ben Franklin is a key figure because he's pretty much seen as a global figure, a very cultured, intelligent fellow, kind of the first scientist of the New World. There was a trial involving a newspaper printer named John Peter Zenger. His paper had printed a number of articles that had criticized the governor of New York as being corrupt and incompetent. A jury voted him not guilty. Though this might have surprised many people who were in power and many people at large, it kind of set the stage for a free press here in what we now know as the United States of America. There was a new energy in religion. It was referred to as the Great Awakening. Sermons had gotten kind of stodgy and repeated themselves week after week, and these began to be referred to as dead dog sermons, old lights, so to speak, not really getting new information on what God wanted from his people. There were some ministers who found ways to move people emotionally and to recharge their spiritual energy. Jonathan Edwards said that faith in God and not good works was the way that anybody could attain eternal salvation. So the idea here is you open up salvation to everyone, not just a select few. Another character who is very capable at reaching people and really making them feel religious zeal was George Whitefield. He was able to command a crowd of thousands of people. Apparently, even Ben Franklin, a logical fellow, a scientist not particularly religious, maybe at the least a deist, he was even moved to tears and to donate money during one of the revivals.